The Galactic Council tried to disarm humanity. The answer rocked the stars. They sent the summons on a Tuesday. Not through the usual diplomatic channel. Not with the courtesy of a prior notice or even a politely worded preface. Just a hard-pulse transmission that cut straight through every filter on my desk, lit up every screen in my office, and sat there blinking at me like it owned the room. I read it twice. Then I set my coffee down very slowly, because my hands were doing something they had not done in 11 years of diplomatic service. They were shaking. The message was 6 paragraphs long. The first 5 were the legal dressing. References to the Accord of Quiet Stars, subsections, clauses, dates, the formal stamp of the Grand Conclave Secretariat. All of it precise, cold, and written in the kind of language designed to make you feel small before you even reach the point. The 6th paragraph was the point. Humanity was ordered to appear before the full Galactic Council in 30 standard cycles. The charge was possession and maintenance of weapons, described as presenting a destabilizing threat to the broader community of recognized species. We were required to submit a complete inventory of all military assets, technology, and research. We were required to do so voluntarily and in good faith. The word voluntarily was doing a lot of work in that sentence. My name is Elia Vasquez. I have been Earth's senior ambassador to the Galactic Council for 6 years. Before that, I spent 5 years as a deputy negotiator at the Lunar Compact talks, and 4 years before that, working refugee resettlement on the Martian corridors. I have dealt with difficult people, impossible situations, and rooms where no one wanted me to succeed. I know what a threat looks like when it is dressed up as an invitation. I forwarded the transmission to Geneva with 1 line of my own attached. Reading this now, please advise. The reply came back in 40 minutes. That was fast, which told me they had already been expecting something like this, which told me something else entirely. The reply was from Secretary General Adaora Osei herself. She did not send a policy document. She did not send a committee recommendation or a legal brief. She sent 4 words. Go, and do not kneel. I printed those 4 words on a small piece of paper and put it in my jacket pocket, where it stayed for the next 30 cycles. The ship they gave me was the UHS Resilience, a diplomatic vessel, technically unarmed as per Council docking protocols, but crewed by 43 people who had, between them, survived things that would make most of the galaxy's pampered civilizations faint. My chief of security, a woman named Gwen Harlow, had spent 8 years in the Deep Range Patrol Corps before moving into close protection work. My communications officer, Oliver Dent, had been a signals specialist during the Ceres incident, which most people outside of Earth still did not know the full details of, and which I had read the classified version of, and which had kept me awake for 3 nights afterward. My personal aide, a 26-year-old from Bristol named Calvin Ford, had never served in any military capacity. He was brilliant, calm, and had a talent for remembering every name, face, and preference of every person he had ever met. I had brought him specifically because in rooms full of beings who expected humans to be loud and aggressive, Calvin had a gift for being the quietest person present and the most dangerous one. We launched on Cycle 4. I spent the transit time reading. The Council had sent its full evidentiary package ahead of the session, as required by procedure. It was, in simple terms, a record of everything terrible humanity had ever done to itself and to the galaxy at large. Every recorded conflict, every weapons test, every deployment, yield estimates, casualty figures, projected expansion of our military research budget over the next 40 years. They had not sent a single page about our hospitals, not a word about the medical scanning technology we had shared freely with 6 council member species after the Keth respiratory plague nearly wiped out the Duvari colony worlds. Not a mention of the hull-shielding design our engineers had patched into the Scali colony ship when it lost containment in the Vorn corridor. No reference to the 600 years of internal warfare that had preceded our arrival on the galactic stage, and that we had, somehow, messily, imperfectly, but genuinely, managed to walk back from. They had sent only the darkness, not what we had built inside it. I read every page. I made notes. I did not get angry, because anger is a tool, and tools are for the right moment. What I felt instead was something quieter and more durable. I felt clear. On cycle 11, Gwen knocked on my cabin door and asked if I was sleeping. I told her I was reading. She leaned against the doorframe. She had a coffee in each hand and gave me one without asking. We stood there for a while, not speaking, looking at the star field through the narrow port window. "You know what gets me," she said eventually. I waited. "They've been watching us for 200 years, since before we had the deep drives. They have records going back to our first radio signals. They watched us build the whole thing, the whole messy climb, and they never once reached down to help. They just watched. And now they want to tell us we climbed wrong." I thought about that for a long time after she left. She was right. The Galactic Council had known about Earth for longer than most humans could emotionally grasp. They had watched us survive climate shifts, resource crises, 2 near-extinction events that were only near because enough humans had refused to accept the alternative. They had watched us reach for the stars with engines built from scratch, on a world that had never given us anything easy, and they had said nothing, done nothing, offered nothing. And now, in cycle 30, I was flying to their station to explain myself. I decided, somewhere between cycle 15 and cycle 16, exactly how I was going to do that. Calvin found me on cycle 22 sketching something on a notepad. He looked over my shoulder and read what I had written. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "That's going to cause a problem." "I know," I said. "They're expecting a defense," he said. "They're expecting us to argue the numbers, challenge the definitions, dispute the jurisdiction." "I know," I said again. He was quiet. Then he picked up the notepad, read it again, set it back down. "This isn't a defense," he said. "No," I said. "It's an answer." He thought about that. Calvin Ford, 26 years old, who had grown up in a city that had been underwater twice in his lifetime, and rebuilt twice by the people who refused to leave, who had watched his grandmother survive something that should not have been survivable, and go right on living her life afterward, quietly and without complaint. "All right," he said. "Then let's make sure they hear it." Helix Station appeared on our forward screens on cycle 29, exactly on schedule. It was, by any measure, an extraordinary structure. A rotating torus, 5 kilometers across, built over 200 years by contributions from 47 species, sitting at the junction of 3 major trade corridors. It caught the light of the nearest star and held it the way a crown holds a jewel, deliberate and self-satisfied. I stood at the forward viewport and looked at it for a long time. Fora Gwen came to stand beside me. She did not say anything. She did not need to. I thought about 4 words on a piece of paper in my jacket pocket. I thought about Adaora Osei, who had been born in Lagos and grown up understanding that the world would not rearrange itself for your comfort, and who had become the most powerful diplomat on Earth precisely because she had never waited for it to. I thought about the Resilience and the 43 people aboard her, none of whom had blinked when they were assigned to this mission. Not one of them had asked for a reassignment. Not one had cited personal reasons or pressing obligations. Humans, I thought. We do this every single time. We were cleared for docking at 0800 station time. As the docking arm extended toward us and the magnetic clamps caught, I straightened my jacket, checked the piece of paper was still in my pocket, and walked toward the airlock. Behind me, I heard Calvin say quietly to Gwen, "Whatever happens in there, we stand." Gwen answered without looking up from her security panel. "We always do." The airlock opened. The air of Helix Station smelled faintly of something I could not name, something ancient and recycled, and shared by dozens of species across 2 centuries. I walked through the hatch and out onto the station platform, and the first thing I saw was a delegation of 12 waiting to receive me. The tallest of them, in the center, stood with the particular stillness of someone who has been told the meeting was already decided before it began. Councillor Vreth of the Scali hegemony. He looked at me the way someone looks at a problem they have already solved in their head, organized, patient, slightly bored. I looked back at him with the expression I had been practicing since cycle 15. Open, calm, ready. He did not know yet what I had in my pocket. He did not know what I had written on that notepad, or what I intended to say in front of the full conclave in fewer than 24 hours. He did not know that I had spent 30 cycles not preparing a defense, but preparing something far more difficult and far more honest. He extended one elongated hand in formal greeting. I shook it. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, "we are glad you came." "Counselor Vreth," I said, "I would not have missed it." He smiled with half his face, the way beings smile when they believe the outcome is already certain. I smiled back with all of mine. The doors to Helix Station closed behind me with a sound like a held breath. 23 hours until the session. I had work to do. The session chamber of the Galactic Council Grand Conclave was designed, I had always believed, to make you feel the weight of everyone who had ever sat in judgment here before you walked in. The ceiling rose 40 meters above the floor. The seating tiers curved in a full circle, each row slightly higher than the one before it, so that whoever stood at the center podium was, geometrically, looking up at everyone. The lighting was calibrated for the visual range of 15 different species simultaneously, which meant it was simultaneously too bright, too dim, too warm, and too cold, depending on where you stood and what you were. I stood at the center podium. I was looking up at 47 delegations. I had slept 4 hours. Calvin had made me eat breakfast, which I did not taste. Gwen had walked the perimeter of our guest suite twice before she was satisfied, and even then she had posted one of her people at the door throughout the night. Oliver Dent had been awake the entire time monitoring communications traffic in and out of the station, looking for anything that felt like a coordinated move. He had found 3 things he did not like and sent me a summary at 0500 with his personal notation at the bottom. They are very busy for people who claim this is a straightforward audit. I tucked that notation next to the piece of paper in my pocket. Counselor Vreth opened the session with procedural language that took 11 minutes. During those 11 minutes, I stood still, looked at various points around the chamber without fixing on any one face, and breathed. Just breathed. Gwen had told me once that in close protection work, breathing was the one thing you could always control, and the moment you controlled your breathing, you controlled your fear. Not eliminated it, controlled it. There was a difference, she said, and the difference mattered. I breathed. The charges were read by a clerk figure from the Secretariat, a small being in formal gray wrappings who read in a flat, rhythmic voice without inflection. The charges took 23 minutes to read in full. I listened to all of them. I did not look away, did not shift my weight, did not reach for the water glass on the podium even though my mouth was dry. Then the evidence began. What followed was 3 hours of everything terrible in human history projected at full scale in the center of the chamber. Not described, projected, visually, with sound. I will not detail it here. You know your own history. We all do. It was not short, and it was not gentle, and it was not selected to show balance. It was selected to make a point, and the point it was designed to make was simple. Here is what this species is. I watched all of it. Every member of my delegation watched all of it. Not because we were unaffected, but because looking away would have meant accepting that it defined us, and we had decided, all of us, somewhere across those 30 cycles, that it would not. When the evidence presentation ended, the chamber was very quiet, the kind of quiet that has texture, that you can feel pressing against your eardrums. Counselor Vreth rose and addressed the conclave in the measured tones of someone delivering a conclusion that he had written before the evidence began. He said that the record before them was clear, that humanity represented an ongoing and escalating risk to regional stability, that the accord of quiet stars existed precisely for moments such as this, that the path forward was straightforward, a full accounting of all weapons systems, research programs, and military infrastructure, to be verified by a council inspection team, followed by a phased disarmament program managed under council oversight, and, naturally, council protection. He paused at that word, protection. He let it sit in the air like a gift. I looked at the formal document on the podium before me, the disarmament decree, 7 pages, stamped and sealed and waiting for a human signature. I did not touch it. Vreth finished his remarks. He looked at me across the chamber with the expression of a man who believes the conversation is over. He had laid out the box. He expected me to step into it. He nodded, indicating that I had the floor. I stepped forward from the podium slightly, just enough to signal that I was not speaking from behind something. I wanted no barrier between me and this room. I began to speak. I did not raise my voice. In a chamber with this kind of acoustics, you do not need to. What you need is clarity. And I had spent 30 cycles becoming very clear. I want to tell you something, I said. Not a defense, not a counter-argument, just something true. The chamber settled. Even Vreth, to his credit, did not interrupt. I said, every piece of evidence you showed today was accurate. Silence. Real silence this time. The kind that means people were not expecting that. I continued. Every conflict, every weapon, every number. We did those things. We built those things. I am not here to dispute the record. I looked around the full circle of the chamber, slowly, giving every delegation a moment of eye contact. What I am here to do is give you the part of the record you chose not to show. Vreth shifted in his seat. Small movement. But I caught it. You showed us at our worst, I said. I understand why. Our worst is genuinely impressive in the wrong direction. But you asked the wrong question. You looked at what we built and you asked, what are they capable of destroying? You should have asked, what are they capable of surviving? I paused. My species was born on a planet that spent 3 million years trying to end us. Not metaphorically. Literally. Ice ages, floods, droughts, plagues, predators, geological events. We did not arrive on that planet in peace. We arrived already in the middle of a fight that we had not started and could not choose to exit. We survived because we were very, very good at not dying. And yes, some of the tools we built for not dying were dangerous. You are surprised by this. I am not. Someone in the upper tiers made a sound, a translator murmur. I did not stop. You showed me the weapons, I said. Let me show you what came out of the same minds that built them. I touched the data panel on the podium. The chamber screens shifted. The medical scanning array that detected the early-stage Keth pathogen in this station's water filtration system 7 years ago. Built by a team at the Johannesburg Applied Sciences Institute, the same team that 2 years earlier had been contracted by the Council's own health body to develop early detection tools. Why that team? Because they had spent a decade building field diagnostic equipment for conflict zones, and field diagnostic equipment in a conflict zone has to be fast, accurate, and built to work when nothing else does. The weapon made the medicine. That is not a contradiction. That is how we work. The chamber was very still. I pulled up the next file. The Vorn Corridor Incident. A Scali colony vessel. The Keth-class longhauler designated Vessel 7 in public record. Lost pressure containment in the outer corridor. 41 hours from the nearest council response team. A human deep-range patrol happened to be 12 hours out. They patched the containment using a technique developed for combat hull repair, a technique that existed because we had spent 50 years learning how to fix ships that had taken damage in the worst possible conditions. They saved 112 Scali lives. The council records list this under routine emergency assistance. It was not routine. The repair should not have been possible with the available materials. It was possible because the crew knew how to solve a problem that was trying to kill everyone present, and they had learned that from a very long and very painful school. I stopped. I looked up at the Scali section of the tiers. I found a young face there, a junior counselor, watching me with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of someone hearing something for the first time that had been true for a very long time. You want to disarm us, I said. I understand the impulse. Truly, we look frightening. Our history looks frightening. But I want to ask this room one question, and I want an honest answer. I looked around the full circle again. Every face, every delegate, every observer. How many of your civilizations were born on a death world? Nobody moved. Nobody raised a hand. Not one. Not a gesture, not a signal, not an equivalent in any species present. The silence was not empty. It was full of something very heavy. We are not frightening because we are broken, I said. We are frightening because we are functional. We survived something that should have ended us before we could stand upright, and we came out of it with the ability to build, to heal, to connect, to imagine, and yes, to defend. Those things are not separate. They come from the same place, the same refusal to stop, The same absolute, unreasonable, deeply human decision to keep going one more day. I reached down and picked up the disarmament decree. All 7 pages. I held it for a moment so the chamber could see it. Then I set it back down on the podium. Earth declines, I said. The room erupted. I stood still and let it erupt around me. Voices, translators, the sharp percussive sound of whatever the hegemony delegates did with their upper appendages when they were agitated. Vreth was on his feet. 3 other senior counselors were speaking simultaneously. The clerk figure from the secretariat was attempting to call order and failing completely. I stood still. Calvin was somewhere behind me. I did not look back, but I knew he was there, and I knew he was standing the same way I was standing. Gwen would be at the chamber entrance, one hand resting at her side, completely relaxed, watching everything. After a full 4 minutes of chaos, the chamber bell rang 3 times, and a fragile quiet returned. Vreth looked at me with the expression of someone revising a plan they had considered finished. Ambassador Vasquez, he said carefully, the Council has the authority, under the Accord, to impose collective measures upon non-compliant member states. It does, I agreed pleasantly. You understand what that means. Sanctions, I said. Trade restrictions. Possibly quarantine. The removal of our voting seat. I tilted my head slightly. We have read the Accord. All of it. Including the sections your presentation today chose not to cite. He stared at me. If the Council proceeds with collective measures, I said, Earth will exercise its right of withdrawal under Section 41 of the original Charter. We will leave the Council, and we will take with us our repair contracts, our medical research sharing agreements, our deep-range emergency response crews, our 17 active joint development projects, and our annual contribution to the Station Maintenance Fund, which, if I recall correctly, represents approximately 12% of Helix Station's total operating budget. The quiet in the room had changed quality. It had gone from shocked to calculating. I looked directly at Vreth. You came here today to solve a problem, I said. I respect that, but I would suggest, respectfully, that you have spent 30 cycles preparing for the wrong conversation, because the question was never whether humanity would accept disarmament. The question was always what you were going to do when we did not. I stepped back from the podium. I am available for further discussion at your convenience, I said. Calvin will have my schedule. I walked back to my seat. The room was still loud, but it was a different kind of loud now. Not the loud of judgment. The loud of something that has cracked open and has not yet decided what shape it will take next. Behind me, barely audible under the noise, I heard Calvin exhale. Just one breath. Steady. That was enough. The 2 days after the session were the kind of days that look, from the outside, like nothing is happening. Closed doors, quiet corridors, very polite conversations over shared meals, the kind of days that are, in reality, the most important kind. Vreth's faction moved fast. I expected that. Within 6 hours of the session ending, they had called an emergency closed vote proposal, a motion to reclassify Earth as a pre-civilized observer state, which would strip our council seat entirely and reduce us to the status of a species under monitoring. It was a clean piece of political work. No sanctions, no confrontation, just a reclassification that quietly removed the problem from the table. I found out about it from Oliver Dent at 0200 station time. He had been listening to encrypted traffic, and he had found the vote scheduled for cycle end. I got up. I got dressed. I woke Calvin. We have 40 hours, I said. He was already reaching for his notes. Who do we need? We needed 12 votes to block it. We had, at that moment, 3 certain allies, 2 possibles, and a number of complete unknowns. What followed was 40 hours. I will not pretend were elegant. Diplomacy at this level is not elegant. It is patient and relentless, and it requires you to find the exact point at which another person's interests and your own truth line up, and then to stand on that point and not move. I met with the Duvari collective delegation at 0700. The Duvari were a quiet species. Small, careful, precise in their language. their senior delegate, a woman named Araya whose translator gave her a low and careful voice, met me in a side room off the main corridor hub and offered me tea in a ceramic cup that had clearly been brought from home. I drank it. It tasted like something I could not identify, and was clearly significant that she had offered it. "You spoke truth in the chamber," she said. "I tried to," I said. She set her cup down and looked at me. Her eyes were a very dark amber, and they held something that I recognized because I had seen it before, in the Martian refugee corridors, in the faces of people who had been patient for a very long time about something that was not going to improve on its own. "We were disarmed," she said, 41 years ago. "Before you joined the Council, the Accord was applied to us after a border dispute with the hegemony, which the Council mediated. We accepted the terms." She paused. "The hegemony now controls 3 of our 4 major trade routes. Council protection teams are stationed on 2 of our colony worlds. We pay for that protection. The fee is set by the Council." I did not say anything. I let her speak. "Your question in the chamber," she said. "How many of your civilizations were born on a death world? I watched the hegemony delegation when you asked that. Do you know what I saw?" "Tell me," I said. "Relief," she said. "Because if you had asked instead, how many of your civilizations were born on a comfortable world, surrounded by resources, protected from the beginning by a stable environment, the answer would have illuminated something they would rather keep in the dark." She reached into her coat and placed a small data chip on the table between us. "This is a record," she said. 40 years of council deliberations regarding the Duvari Collective. Internal minutes. Vote records. The instructions sent to the mediation team before our border dispute was resolved." She looked at me steadily. "We have been waiting for someone to be in a position to use this usefully." I looked at the chip. I did not pick it up immediately. "If this becomes public," I said, "it will not be a comfortable process." "No," she said, "but it will be an honest one, and we have been waiting a long time for an honest process." I picked up the chip. That meeting lasted 40 minutes. The next one, with a mid-tier delegation from a species called the Venn Collective, lasted 2 hours. The one after that, with a young Scully junior counselor named Ayla, who had found me in the commissary while I was eating a meal I could not taste, lasted 20 minutes, and ended with her pressing my hand between both of hers and saying something in her own language that the translator rendered as approximately, "The record does not end with what they showed today." I did not know if that was a promise or a statement of fact. I chose to treat it as both. Calvin tracked the vote count through a small screen he carried in his jacket. He updated me every 2 hours. By hour 30, we had 9 confirmed blocks. We needed 12. At hour 37, Oliver sent me a message that contained 3 words: "Check your inbox." I checked it. 2 delegations had sent formal statements of position change. One had been sitting on the fence, waiting to see which way the wind moved. The other was a species I had never personally spoken to, a quiet and deeply private group called the Mirith, who had been council members for 300 years, and who voted, historically, with the prevailing bloc. They had voted with us. That was 12. The closed vote proposal failed. I found out the result at 0:47 station time. I was sitting in the Resilience's small common room with Gwen and Oliver and Calvin, all of us too tired to sleep and too alert to pretend otherwise. Gwen had made something hot that was technically coffee in the broad sense of the word. When my screen showed the result, I did not say anything for a moment. Then Calvin said, 12. 12, I confirmed. Gwen raised her cup. She did not make a speech. She just raised it. The rest of us raised ours. That was enough. The following day, Vreth requested a private meeting. Not a session. A meeting. Just 2 of us, in one of the small conference rooms off the main corridor. He was different in private. Not warm. I do not think Vreth did warm, but less performed. More direct. He sat with his long hands folded on the table, and he looked at me without the chamber's theatrical distance between us, and he said, "You understand that this is not finished." "I know," I said. "What you did with the Duvari chip," he said. The evidence had been given to Oliver, who had given it to the Council's own transparency officer under a formal protected disclosure, which meant it was now in the hands of a process even Vreth could not quietly end. That will have consequences. Probably, I said. He was quiet for a moment. I want you to understand something, he said. The proposal was not born from fear of humanity's capacity to cause harm. It was born from a calculation about stability. Your species is unpredictable. You do not behave in expected patterns. Other species, when they reach your level of development, follow a relatively consistent trajectory. You do not. I looked at him. We know, I said. We take it as a compliment. Something moved in his expression. Not humor exactly, but the acknowledgement of something that might, in another context, be humor. The Accord review will take 2 years, he said. The Duvari situation will be investigated. The protection fee structure will be examined. He paused. None of this is what I planned when I drafted the disarmament proposal. No, I agreed. But it is, I would suggest, considerably better. He looked at me for a long moment. Your proposal, he said. The threat registry. Shared transparency. All members, including Earth, publicly logging military capabilities and justifying them against documented threats. Yes, I said. It is not a simple thing to implement. No, I said. But it is an honest thing, and I find that honest things, even when they are difficult, tend to hold together better over time than comfortable things. Vreth was quiet. He looked at his folded hands. He looked back at me. The conclave will consider it, he said. That is all I asked for, I said. He stood. I stood. We did not shake hands this time, but he inclined his head, which his translator had once told me was a Scully gesture, used between individuals of equivalent standing. I inclined mine back. I came home on a Thursday. That struck me only when we broke atmosphere, and I looked at the clock and realized it was a Thursday, and that somewhere down in the bright sprawl below me, people were going through their ordinary Thursday without knowing that the last 32 cycles had happened, without knowing that a vote had nearly stripped Earth of its galactic standing, without knowing about Araya and her ceramic cup and the chip she had carried for 40 years, without knowing about Ayla, the Scully junior counselor, who had sent me a message as the Resilience disengaged from Helix Station that said simply, in English she had apparently learned overnight, "We were wrong about you. We are sorry." I had replied, "We were wrong about some things too. We can both be better." She had replied, "Yes." That conversation stayed with me for the whole transit home. I thought about it when I could not sleep, which was most of the transit. I thought about how much time gets wasted when the story someone tells about you is incomplete. Not false necessarily, just incomplete. And how the moment you fill in the missing parts, everything shifts, and the people who were ready to write you off are suddenly looking at you differently, and you are looking at them differently, and neither of you knows quite what to do with that yet, but it is a start. A real start. Not the ceremonial kind. Adaora Ose met me at the landing facility. Not formally. She was standing at the edge of the platform with 2 cups of coffee and a coat she had clearly grabbed in a hurry, and when I came down the steps she handed me a cup without ceremony and we stood side by side and looked at each other for a moment. "You didn't kneel," she said. "No," I said. "I watched the full session recording," she said. "All of it." I nodded. "The question you asked," she said. "How many of your civilizations were born on a death world?" She paused. I watched 47 delegations hear that question, and I watched their faces. "What did you see?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I saw them realize something," she said. "Something they had probably known, intellectually, for a very long time. But knowing something, and being asked to look at it directly in a room full of witnesses, those are 2 different things." I drank my coffee. The air smelled like the city below us, like concrete and rain and food stalls, and the particular kind of noise that a city makes when 1,000,000 people are all living their lives simultaneously, without coordinating with each other, which is one of the most human things in the world, and which I had not realized I had missed, until this exact moment. "There is something else," I said. I took the data chip out of my pocket. I had made a copy before handing the original to Oliver. Not for leverage, just because some things should not exist in only one place. The Duvari gave this to me, I said. I told her what was on it. I told her what Araya had said about the trade routes and the protection fees, and the 40 years of patience. Adaora listened without interrupting. She was very good at listening. It was, I had always thought, her most important skill. Better than her memory, better than her political instinct, better than her extraordinary ability to speak to a room of 500 people and make each of them feel individually addressed. The listening came first. Everything else came from it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. So it is not just about us, she said. No, I said. It never was. She nodded slowly. The threat registry proposal, she said. Where does it stand? The conclave will consider it next cycle, I said. Vreth will not support it openly, but he told me they would consider it, and Vreth does not say things he does not mean, even when they are inconvenient. And the Accord suspension? 2 years of review. Real review, not performative. The Duvari disclosure is in the transparency process. It cannot be withdrawn. I paused. 3 senior counselors have already indicated they will step back from active roles during the investigation period. Adaora absorbed all of this. She looked out at the city. Do you think they will pass it? She asked. The registry. I think, I said carefully, that the council spent 2 centuries watching us from a comfortable distance and deciding that they knew what we were. And I think that the last 32 cycles have introduced some doubt into that assumption. And I think doubt, when it is introduced into a very old and very confident system, tends to create space, and space is where things change. She was quiet. You read the Duvari files, she said. It was not a question. Yes, I said. All of them. Yes, I said again. She looked at me, and I thought about Araya's ceramic cup and the amber of her eyes, and 40 years of patience waiting for an honest process. I thought about Ayla's message, written in learned English, saying sorry without ceremony. I thought about the Mirith, who had voted with us after 300 years of following the prevailing bloc, and who had given no public explanation, and whom I intended to speak with as soon as the next cycle opened, because I suspected their reasons were important, and I suspected no one had ever thought to ask. I thought about Gwen, who had made coffee in the common room at 0147, and raised her cup without a speech. I thought about Calvin, who had stood behind me in the chamber, and exhaled one steady breath when it was over. I thought about a planet that had spent 3 million years trying to end us, and had not managed it. I said, reasons. A lot of reasons to get stronger. Adaora looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked out at the city again. The light was changing. Late afternoon moving toward evening. The kind of light that makes even ordinary things look briefly significant. Good, she said quietly. She meant it the way I had meant it. Not as a threat. Not as a challenge. As a statement of direction. A simple and permanent commitment to the work. We stood there until the light changed fully, and the city below us began to glow with its own light, the kind that does not wait for the sun. Then we went inside. There was a lot to do. There always is, with us. That is not a complaint.